hours, no way. Workers' rights and decent pay.
0 hours, no way. Workers' rights and decent pay. 0 hours, no way. Workers' rights and decent pay. 0 hours, no way. Workers' rights and decent pay. 0 hours, no way. Workers' rights and decent pay.
Ian Mearns, who's going to speak first, who's got the bill coming through Parliament today.
Thanks very much, Julie. That's really kind of you. Well, there it is. That's the bill. I'm afraid to say, though, the time will not allow us to actually get this carried this afternoon. But the good news is that the front bench Labour leadership are now backing the contents of this bill, so that when we get elected, that will become law under a Labour government. And it's so vitally important that we actually take this legislation forward. 1.4 million workers now on 0 hours contracts. These are not an easy passport to employment. These now are exploitative practices being abused by many companies up and down the country. Companies like Sports Direct, who have about something like 85% of their employees on 0 hours contracts, and workers who completely miss out on things like holiday pay, sick pay, and all the other entitlements that we've fought for so very hard over generations. So employment rights being completely eroded by unscrupulous and abusive employers. So we've got to put an end to those practices. So I'm very glad for the support today, and we will take this forward into the next Labour government. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm just going to introduce Ian Lavery to speak a few words as well.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today as a Labour MP opposing 0 hour contracts. But let me tell you, it's one of the worst ways in which to exploit any individual, by making them on many occasions sit and wait by a telephone to get a text to see whether you've got any work that day, that week, perhaps that month. And it's an absolute outrage in 2014 that we are in one of the wealthiest nations in the world treating workers like this. It has got to be outlawed as soon as the Labour Party get into power in 2015. Never mind tinkering with 0 hour contracts, they've got to be banned in their entirety, comrades. You know, when we look at what 0 contracts actually are, and we look back in history, back to the early parts of the last century, where people used to turn up at the gates for employment, 20, 30, 40, sometimes hundreds of people wanted a job in a factory, wanted a job in a shipyard, wanted to work in the mining industry, and the bosses used to turn up at the gates and say, we'll have you, we'll have you, and we'll have you. The rest can get lost and get away. And we're turning back the clock to those days with the 0 hour contracts. But listen, it's mainly young people that are impacted with 0 hour contracts. We herald of new apprenticeships in this country, millions of new apprenticeships, and at the same time these apprentices are paid £2.73 per hour. They've had an increase of 23 pence in 5 years. Is that not an absolute disgrace as well? Living in a low wage economy, exploiting young people, exploiting mainly young women in the workplace. Comrades, these 0 hour contracts have got to be abolished for a number of reasons. Protection in the workplace, the fact that ordinary people cannot even try to plan a life ahead of them, plan a family, holidays, save any money. They haven't got anything in order in terms of finance to plan anything that ordinary people in proper employment can actually do. I think, in concluding, I'm delighted to be a sponsor of Ian Mearns' bill, a great comrade of mine. I would love to see it go through and hope that it does this afternoon. It'll be difficult, but never mind what happens this afternoon. Keep on the campaign trail. Keep pressurising your MPs. Keep pressurising everybody and anybody who will listen. And before I conclude, tell these people who keep tweeting me, who are on 0 hour contracts, who say that they're a good idea and they suit them, that there's much better alternatives out there in the workplace, and we will keep fighting for that. Thank you very much.
We've always had a situation for certain groups of workers, if they want to limit the time in which they're employed by a particular employer, we negotiate a fixed term contract. That's always been the case. But what we're not going back to at zero hours contracts, what we reject is what used to happen to my dad on the Liverpool docks in the 30s, is where he'd turn up for work in the morning, they would line up 50 to 100 men, who Gaffer would come out, he'd pick the men who he thought were sufficiently, well, compliant really, would get work that week. And if you spoke up in any way, or if you're a union organiser, you didn't get work. And my dad and my granddad before him on Liverpool docks, year after year, would be victimised as a result of a process that was what we call now zero-hour contracts, but was basically victimisation, bullying and exploitation. We thought we'd got rid of that by the 1940s and early 1950s with the dock labour scheme and trade union rights right the way across the country. We've now gone back, to be frank, to the 1930s, and it's intolerable. That's why we're coming forward with Ian's bill today. He's been an absolute star, he's fought, he's got the bill there. But what we want now is absolute abolition of zero hours contracts. Linked to that, the reason they've got zero hours contracts is because they want to bully and intimidate and make sure they can suppress wages. So linked to that is the campaign. Let's be clear about it. It's not the minimum wage, it's not the living wage. We want £10 an hour, simple as that. And that's what we're campaigning for through the Hungry for Justice campaign. The Bakers Union need congratulating for establishing the Fast Food Workers campaign back in January. They've been valiant in their attempts to recruit the most vulnerable workers in our society and at the same time mobilising both the industrial and direct action campaign. That will go on, but it needs more and more support. So we need to get the word of mouth out now. Join the Hungry for Justice campaign. Start recruiting and campaigning in your own communities, outside the McDonald's, the Costas and all the rest of them. We met the American campaigners last Friday, thanks to the Bakers Union inviting them over, and to be frank, they were absolutely inspirational. From the lowest base possible, in the belly of the beast of capitalism, they've organised, they've mobilised, and they're winning. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do here. And we'll do it, I repeat again, through courage, determination, but above all else, solidarity. Solidarity, brothers and sisters.
The TUC Young Workers Forum put a motion to Congress calling for an organising strategy aimed at young workers in the lowest density sectors and in the most precarious jobs. Over the next few months, we'll be working with the young members to develop this strategy, a key element of which will be supporting unions who are prioritising the organisation of young workers. So colleagues, this Fast Food Rights campaign, as well as winning better pay and dignity at work for thousands of young workers, can also show the rest of the trade union movement what we need to do. We need to prioritise the issues that young people care about, and they will listen to us. We need to move our campaigns out of the committee rooms and onto the streets, and they will join us. We need to act with them and not for them, and not only will they join unions, they'll strengthen them as well. Thank you for listening, and victory to the Fast Food Rights campaign.
The reality of zero-hour contracts isn't just the working hours. The reality of zero-hour contracts, living on a zero-hour contract, is the fact that you can't get a mobile phone contract. You can't nowadays. Now, private landlords are letting people on zero-hour contracts live in their houses. You've no proof of income. You can't say to anybody, you know, I'm going to earn X amount of money per week or per month. And what's happening is it's driving these people down into poverty. They're having to claim benefits just to buy basics such as food. Not even, you know, exotic holidays. Basic things just as food and feeding their children. And that in 2014 is wrong. Now, I think the zero bill is a great start, but in my personal opinion, it doesn't go far enough. Banning the exclusivity clause is great, and I agree with that totally. But why should employees have to wait 12 weeks? If you're an employee for Greggs, you get a 16-hour contract the minute you sign that contract. You don't have to wait 12 weeks, and then they might decide, well, we'll give you an average of the weekly hours. You get it straight away. And the zero-hour contracts can't be replaced by a one-hour contract. There needs to be a minimum. So, for example, again, minimum hours, 16. But to completely tackle the ending work poverty, a minimum wage of £10 an hour for all, which is another of our campaigns, needs to be in. And do you know what the answer from the employers will be? You know, the greedy ones that take all the profits and pay the managing directors millions upon millions of pounds? Well, if we do that, we'll have to, you know, give them lesser hours, or we'll have to put the prices up. No, you won't. Just cut your own hours, cut your own salaries. You know, if we can manage on the shit wages that you pay us, you can manage with taking a pay cut to make it so that we can work for a decent living. So yeah, I don't want to say too much more because it's already been covered, and I know there's some more speakers and it's cold and we're all getting wet. But do you know what? We need to get rid of 0-hour contracts. We need to replace them with decent contracts of 16 hours or more with £10 an hour wage. Thank you.
And it's good that the bill's being brought into Parliament today, but obviously, as everybody knows, right, the bill itself does it in lots of ways that, as Sarah has said, it's not going far enough. What we need, really, is to start talking about fair contracts for all. And I think there's a second thing that is important for us to talk about that other people have raised, which is the issue of the minimum wage and what we're fighting for. See, I came back and saw the run up to Labour Party conference and saw that Ed Miliband had raised the idea of £8 an hour, and you think, well, it's not good enough, write stuff over it, but then you find out it's in 2020, and it's no wonder when the £10 an hour argument is raised over the minimum wage that people are starting to rally around it. And obviously everybody's spoken about the inspiration from the United States of the campaign for $15 an hour, but we need something that we can start to rally our side around.
Come May, we won't be voting for MPs that say we won't introduce a £10 an hour minimum wage. We won't be voting for MPs who say we won't scrap 0-hours contracts. It was a third-party politician, a socialist politician in Seattle who helped win $15 an hour. And we won't go round voting for people who won't fight for us. But also, there's two strands for our campaign, because it's one thing to have politicians talking about 0-hours contracts and how we scrap them. But really what we need to do is to go to the workplaces and build the union to organise and fight for our share. Thanks.
The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated.